I love a decent horror anthology film. To qualify for a good watchable horror anthology, if there were 2 great or captivating segments out of perhaps 5 in total, while the rest are middle of the road or perhaps 1 really awful, I would rate this anthology film as a good time with sparkling recommendation. In the early 2010s, Bloody Disgusting creator Brad Miska came up with an idea for a found footage horror anthology, with the inception of people finding classic videotape recordings with the scratchiness and constant tape-overs to tell stories of the most absurd, offensive, and simply bloody disgusting nature. The original VHS was released in 2012, and 6 more films followed in the franchise, as well as 2 spin-off films and a mini-series called Video Horror Shorts exclusively premiered on Snapchat. In this review, KK will do a concise reviews of all 7 VHS films, so buck up for the ride. The first VHS movie, as mentioned, was conceived by Brad Miska and developed with a group of filmmakers he knew over the years, and see if everyone pitches in an idea and the producers simply gave them free reins of their segment before weaving the movie together. It started with a frame narrative part called Tape 56, directed by Adam Wingard, who was a key member of the Mumblecore movement and at that juncture made interesting horror features like You're Next and The Guest. The story talked about a criminal gang being assigned to steal a VHS tape from a house but starting to feel amiss of their mission and got wrapped up with the VHS tapes they were supposed to scour for. The segment, composed of prologue, 3 interludes, and the epilogue, was the classic Karma is a Bitch kind of story, which is a running theme in this franchise. As these are found footage segments, the reasons behind filming the characters have to make sense, and in this case, it was likely the gang taping it down for ego showcase in the future. The motive of stealing of a VHS tape and having to vet through the mountain of tapes ingeniously tied to the concept of the movie. The mumblecore style of the filmmaking worked brilliantly for such found footage situation with minimal need for cinematic quality. Director Wingard was able to create tension and deliver the scares when it matters. While Tape 56 provides a succinct prologue to the anthology film, the first actual segment, Amateur Night, directed by David Bruckner and written by Bruckner and Nicholas Tarkovsky, needed to start strong, and I felt it delivered. As the title implied, a bunch of friends were bought into the idea of making an amateur porn film in their motel with a couple of girls they met by chance. Of course, things did not turn out according to their plan and they met a gory end. The concept of a siren-type entity was a pretty refreshing one, and it was usually a myth from the Great Britain and neighbouring European countries, and transposing to the grimy American motel and dealing with recalcitrant dudes, it worked a splendour. British actress Hannah Fearman had a face you will not forget, and can give you a nightmare turn like in her character here. She would reprise the same role in the 2016 spin-off movie called Siren. Director Bruckner went off to carve a career in horror filmmaking with 2017's The Ritual, 2020's The Night, and 2022 remake of Hellraiser. He would also produce later VHS films. Ty West's second honeymoon was touched upon on my recent review of Maxine. A typical home video of a young couple who went on a road trip, and like in that Tom Hanks movie, Big, the wife got her fortune told by those carnival type of mechanical fortune teller, which somehow foretold their fate ultimately. The segment could be a slow burn, with barely likable characters, but the twist was interesting enough. It pales in comparison with Amateur Night of course, and considering Ty West at this stage of his career, a respected horror film director, this was slightly lackluster. West we all know went to do very well with the X-Trilogy. Director Glenn McQuaid's Tuesday the 17th definitely was an ode to Friday the 13th with a twist that was not something noteworthy. The whole concoction on screen reminded me of the 2022 Japanese horror feature based on the famous urban legend Kisaragi Station, directed by Nagae Jiro, in which weird occurrences popping up non-stop in a twisted realm, and it got obnoxious pretty quickly. The video recording by the weed-smoking young people documented the chain of events of a strange assailant, and for me, I was glad what had happened to the characters in the end. Irish director McQuaid made 2008 I Sell the Date but did not make a full-length feature since that movie. More mumblecore representative as actor Joe Swanberg, who we had already seen his involvement acting in the role of Sam in Second Honeymoon, now taking over the directorial helm on a script written by Simon Barrett. The sick thing that happened to Emily when she was younger made use of the video call something like Scream Live in films such as Unfriended. It was a creepy exploration of the titular Emily, who complained about a bump on her arm which could not subside, but it turned out to be something that was linked to her past, and it melded supernatural horror with something out of this world. What transpired in the low-resolution video call did make my skin crawl, and the twist was something to savor. Joe Swanberg directed many movies starring the likes of Anna Kendrick and Olivia Wilde prior to his involvement with VHS, and the horror movie he was associated with after this would be 2020 The Rental, which he wrote and produced. Finally, we have 31st October 98, the segment written and directed by the quartet known as Radio Silence, with 3 of the directors in the cast as 4 lads going for a Halloween party in anticipation of alcohol and getting lucky with the opposite gender, but things escalated quickly and morbidly. The future directors of movies like Ready or Not, Scream 5 and Scream 6 created a hectic found footage segment filled with intricately created scares which included occultists and witchcraft. Sad to say, as it was the final segment, it somehow got tiresome as the acting and the storytelling weren't engaging enough. Looking through the list of filmmakers, Brad Miska certainly had gathered a decent caliber to create this modern anthology that garnered good reviews back then. Personally, Ambition Night and The Sick Thing That Happened to Emily were memorable, while the others were just okay, with Tuesday the 17th the bottom of the barrel. VHS is highly watchable and maybe rewatchable as well. I'm rewarding it a 7 out of 10. VHS 2 premiered less than a year later in 2013, with 4 brand new segments and a framed narrative which seamlessly anchored these 4 stories into the whole narrative of the movie. Simon Barrett, who wrote both Adam Wingard and Joe Swanberg segments in the first VHS, wrote and directed a framed narrative called Tape 49. A couple of private investigators hoping to uncover the truth of the disappearance of their client's sons, but got sucked into the myriad of strange video playing TV scattered in the dormitory. It was a creepy mood that Barrett had concocted, as we the audience wondered who was lurking in the background at the start. Then it was extreme viscera mixed with the classic skin-crawling supernatural event. The final resolution was equally baffling and satisfying with regards to the persona of the protagonist from the onset. Adam Wingard returned with Phase 1 clinical trial, which was a visceral take of the movie The Eye. Written again by Simon Barrett, we had our protagonist Herman being given an ocular implant after a car accident, and as the title of the segment implied, it was a clinical trial. Herman had to be agreeable to be supervised with the recording capability of the implant. While he was recuperating at home by playing video games, it started to get frightening when seemingly Herman could see ghost-like entities within his own house. So like the protagonist of The Eye, Herman was at wit's end to be constantly bothered by horrifying intruders, but unlike the classic Thai Hong Kong film, there was the companionship of an opposite gender who shared the same fate as Herman, as Clarissa had a cochlear implant leading to her able to hear ghostly whispers, and the pair tried to figure things out, just not in the nick of time. There was nothing to highlight about the filmmaking, but the plot and gory ending made this watchable at the very least. A ride in the park made use of the utility of a GoPro camera for an avid trail biker who unwittingly stumbled into a zombie invasion. In an interesting twist, it became a first-person experience of a zombie as it tried to seek out more victims and documenting the reanimation of the victims and how prospective victims will react as the zombies lumbered towards them. The segment was directed by Eduardo Sanchez, one half of the Blair Witch Project directing duo, as well as Greg Hill, the producer of the said horror classic. Therefore, we have the forefathers of found footage horror, but really this was nothing to holler about. Timo Tjahjanto and Gareth Evans' Safe Haven might be the most intriguing segment of this movie, in which an Indonesian documentary crew tried to infiltrate a cult's establishment, and you know things were not going to go according to plan. Tajanto, one half of the Mo brothers who did films like May the Devil Takes You, and Evans, who made those swashbuckling raid movies, seamlessly create a story that had an indie flavor, yet not the conventional horror elements you would see in a predominantly Muslim backdrop. The craziness of the story kept escalating to a stage that I thought it might jump the shark, but it was not something to be frowned upon in this horror movie franchise. A familiar face for those who followed my channel, which I have done a few Joko Anwar's review, was Fakhri Alba, a recurring collaborator of Joko, being cast as a protagonist Adam here, and I thought he carried a terror from the craziness surrounding him brilliantly. The final segment was Slumber Party Alien Abduction. It was a classic parents went on a trip and the kids went out of control, as siblings tried to film each other doing things that could be used to blackmail each other, and the family dog unfortunately was used as an accomplice, in this case the camera person, loaded with a GoPro to scamper around doing the documentation. Little did the siblings knew they were in the precipice of a fate closer to M. Night Shyamalan's Sign. Prior to the release of Jordan Peele's Nope, a found footage alien abduction might be something that will win this segment some accolades. This segment was written by John Davis and director Jason Eisner, who did the highly raved Hobo with a Shotgun, which came from a mock trailer from the anthology film Grindhouse. And this segment also spawned a standalone spin-off in Kids vs. Aliens, with Eisner returning as the director. In conclusion, VHS 2 definitely paled in comparison to the predecessor. Many of the segments just use the convenient idea of GoPro or clinical trial to tell the story, while Safe Haven, although a nice change of scenery, can be quite self-indulgent for the filmmakers. This was a 6 out of 10 for me. 2014's VHS Viral, as the title implied, focused upon the viral nature of footages taken by the affluent utility of recording equipment we possess in modern times, namely our mobile device, and shared on social media platforms, which sometimes rousing attention from a global audience. The film narrative was titled Vicious Cycles, written and directed by Marcel Sarmiento, with creative input from TJ Sinfeld and David White. It was about Kevin, an amateur videographer who was infatuated with filming his beautiful girlfriend, seemingly still using old-school camcorder, which created glitches and filmed over that was not probable in a digital shooting world. A wild police chase a la O.J. Simpson happened in his neighborhood, which of course would pique the interest of anyone with a recording device, much less a videographer. What ensued in the multiple interludes was some hysteria that included my favorite part involving somebody being forcefully amputated while being stuck on a fast-moving vehicle. There was also mocking of bank bus. If you know, you know. In the end, the plot spiraled into a sort of chainmail horror akin to Ringu and resulted into a gruesome resolution. Director Sarmiento's notable work will be prior to VHS Viral in 2008's Dead Girl. Our first segment was titled Dante the Great and was written and directed by Greg Bishop, who would go on to direct spin-off movie Siren from Amateur Night in the first VHS movie in the year 2016. Dante the Great was a strung-together CCTV footages of an illusionist who had inherited a magical cloak that even Doctor Strange would be envious of. However, unlike the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the cloak was far from a comedic sidekick, as the characters were soon embroiled in some grisly tussles, as this was not for those faint-hearted Harry Potter fans. The editing was hectic and perhaps too fast if you do not really pay much attention. But the story was something refreshing and added a sense of quirk and mysticism to the franchise. Nacho Vigalondo, the Spanish filmmaker, was perhaps the most renowned director for the VHS franchise so far, and I was swept away with his 2007's film Time Crimes or Los Cronocrímenes. In the subsequent years, he would go on to make notable films with Elijah Woods in Open Windows and Anna Kendrick in Colossal. His segment was called Parallel Monsters, in which a Spanish scientist created a portal that allowed him to transverse to different parallel universes, a theme that had been raging in the cinematic world in the past few years. Instead of finding a different version of Peter Parker, our Spanish friend went into a world where his supposed wife was swinging with well-chiseled statuesque men and people doing satanic ritual like nobody's business. In the end, it was a Vigilando wilderness fetish coming true, and I was expecting something a bit more memorable and substantial from the famed Spanish author. Speaking of satanic rituals, the next segment, titled Bone Storm, touched upon that when a bunch of obnoxious skater chaps stumbled into an ominous locality that drew entities who were out for their blood and much more. It was shot with a GoPro and it was a chaotic ordeal from the get-go, but especially infuriating by the end. Gorehounds might actually derive some joy from this segment, even though it was not pristinely created as well. The final part ended at a storm drain, which resembled the epilogue of the frame narrative, which can be confusing as I thought the two parts were linked when they were not. This segment was written and directed by Justin Benson and Aaron Scott Moorhead, who would make Spring, a body horror film in the same year of VHS Viral, which got positive reviews. Ultimately, the various segments did not adopt in the vein of Viral part of a found footage, and while the likes of Dante the Great and Parallel Monsters had interesting premise, the execution and final products left a lot to be desired. Vicious Cycles helped the movie competently, but at this point, the franchise was dying a slow death. It was a 5 out of 10 from me. With the ailing state of the franchise, it went 7 years without a sequel until David Bruckner and Brad Miska brought it back to life in 2021 with VHS 94. He also started a series of VHS sequels tied to a specific year. I really did not know what monumental events from 1994 that would lead to the concept of this version of VHS, but I was rooting for a return to form. The frame narrative, titled Holy Hell, was directed by Jennifer Reeder, whose notable work after that was Perpetrator in 2023. A SWAT team raiding a warehouse that they assumed to be a drug bust but turned out to be a grotesque scenes of body parts, eerie rituals, and TV screens to play into the various segments, something that were used in the first VHS but slowly eroded in subsequent sequels. Such SWAT raid was a dime a dozen in this franchise, including one we will see in this sequel, so this was not one of the memorable ones out of the lot. That said, the aesthetic was on point and the lead into the various segments deserved some points. More storm drain. To a state that director Chloe Okuno named her segment The Place Where a Roaming Reporter and a Cameraman Went to Investigate on the Urban Legend of the Horrific Rat Man. If I was a viewer of this new segment back in 1994, I would likely to be rolling my eyes at such piss-poor attempt of a lame sensationalization of a filler news that I feel even reporter Holly and cameraman Jeff felt wretched to creep into the sewers, likely to capture nothing in the soggy darkness rather than seeing a cheap knockoff of Master Splinter. Little did they know, there were creepy dwellers in the sewers, and they were actually devotees of something residing in the chasm, which led to some goo spewing and a fun repercussion on live TV. Director Okuno would go on to make a feature film directorial with 2022 Watcher with Micah Monroe, as well as directing episodes of the latest James Wan produced Peacock TV series Teacup. Simon Barrett is back with The Empty Wake, a classic horror feature in a funeral home where a worker was assigned to safeguard the wake in a thunderstorm and the coffin constantly shifting on its own, and sooner or later you know the power was to be cut off. I like how through telephone conversations the wretched worker Haley had with her friends helped to bait out the backstory of the body in the coffin and helped a lot with the plot points. And in 1994, without any smartphones, poor Haley had to kill time calling friends on the landline, and when there was no power, it really pushed her to the limit. The climax was scary and effective. I really enjoyed it. Indonesian director Timo Tadjanto is back too with The Subject. This was a classic body horror feature that fans of movies like Tetsuo the Iron Man would appreciate. This was the SWAT team segment I was talking about, and the action set pieces were much better crafted. However, the high-definition aesthetic seems out of place in this movie, and the backdrop and production values did not seem to be indicating it was from the 1990s. I got a feeling that this was included in this film in the last minute, considering the clash of time period as well as the duplication of the SWAT attack plotline. The main experiment subject definitely reminded me of the animated web series my son's been watching called Skibidi Toilet. The heroes called cameraman, in this case a camera woman. The interchanging of the point of view from the camera woman to the SWAT team video recording helped to facilitate storytelling. As I was typing this, the day Donald Trump, the Republican candidate, became the president-elect, Ryan Prowse, a relatively unknown director, wrote and directed Terror with a white supremacist group which can be the real terror than any supernatural beings in America with their staunchly crazy mythology and the penchant to load up the ammunition. To be truthful, I could not get into this segment, mostly due to the subject matter, partly due to the poorly filmed segment. It seems like the group held hostage a dark entity they want to unleash for a plan of theirs, and these numbskulls did not consider the dangers surrounding them the moment they keep it captive. In the end, they reaped what they sowed and well deserved the outcome. I did not know that there was a character in this part linked to the film narrative, perhaps the first time a sort of shared universe between different segments. VHS 94 is surely the classic anthology film with a couple of good segments in Storm Drain and The Empty Wake, and a decent one in The Subject. While Terror was not horrible, it certainly did not hold my attention. Fortunately, that was the final segment, which also led me blanking out on the epilogue. Generally, it's a slight return to form. It's a 6 out of 10 in my rating. The next installment came in the form of VHS 99, released in 2022, and the threat of Y2K virus and the innate fear of the world coming to an end at the precipice of a new millennium. I was anticipating a strong sense of uncertainty kind of storyline that seems elusive in this presentation. Unlike the previous VHS movies, there is a lack of a frame narrative in between each short segment. Instead, interludes of a home video from Brady with his toys from the segment Gawkers. We will talk about that later. The first segment, called Stradding, which I suppose was a term for guitar performance, started the ball rolling, and this was a barely more tolerable than the Skater Kid segment from VHS Viral. A punk rock band wanted to tempt fate in an abandoned music pub, where another band had been killed years ago, just for shit and giggles, and got so astounded when the date came for their lives for the blatant disrespect. It was so good to watch them drop like flies, and the music wasn't good either. The segment was directed by Maggie Levin, who did second unit direction for The Black Phone. Suicide Beat, written and directed by Johannes Roberts, was your classic freshman girl trying her utmost best to join a sorority, therefore cemented her place in the cool college ecosystem. Lily, our protagonist, started filming herself to document her journey to join Beta Sigma Eta, to a disapproval from her roommate whom was scorned for not being cool enough. Lily of course had to go through a death-defying dare as the seniors of the sorority hazed the ass of the freshmen without the intention of actually accepting her into the sorority. What transpired was a scary journey for our protagonist, which was tough for people suffering from the likes of claustrophobia or arachnophobia to endure before supernatural elements ensued. Those abhorrent sorority sisters deserved to be put through the same torturous procession. It was sweet, sweet revenge in store for them. This was a competent horror short, made by a competent writer-director. Johannes Roberts is the star name in this batch of directors for the films he had made. Just to name a few, we got The Other Side of the Door in 2016, then 47 Meters Down in 2017, and the sequel, 47 Meters Down Uncaged in 2019, and the reboot of the Resident Evil franchise, Welcome to Raccoon City in 2021. From DJ, rapper, and director Flying Lotus, comes a surreal take of the classic Nickelodeon-style children's game show, this one called Ozzy's Dungeon. In some sort of social commentary, the game show host showed bias towards Donna, the black girl from a poor neighborhood, but with the determination to win against all odds. She was at the brink of doing so until an unfortunate mishap that devastated her and her family, leading to the second half of the story with a vendetta in mind. A quick-witted compromise had been made which allowed Donna to fulfill her childhood dream from that fateful game show. Well, a dream will turn into a nightmare as Flying Lotus gave us a big WTF moment in the end. The segment featured Steve Ogg in the role of the detestable game show host. Well, he might not look like it under the makeup, but he was actually the model for Trevor from the game Grand Theft Auto 5. Another bunch of awful teenage boys, ruffling the feathers to everyone along their path, and the nerdy younger brother of one of the boys, whose home videos of his toys serve as the interludes for this anthology. We have the gawkers. Their recalcitrant ways were on display from the video recordings they made along the way, and as teenage boys, their attention naturally turned towards the sexy, sultry neighbor across the road, who unknowingly would do car wash in hot pants or simply sunbathe in the skimpiest bathing suit. For sure, this was an American Pie teen comedy motif, as boys dreamt about hooking up with a woman like Stifler's mom. No, that was not the case, as even though the boys did manage to satisfy their youthful lust, before shit hits the fans instantaneously. This presentation definitely reminded me of Amateur Night from the original VHS, and the home video aesthetic helped with the tension from poor Brady till the very end. The storyline also made use of the outdated amateur hacking via old school internet, which made little sense, but was really fun and once again brought me back to the days of American Pie. Written by Tyler McIntyre and Chris Lee Hill and directed by McIntyre, who most famously written the screenplay for Blumhouse adaptation of Five Nights at Freddy's. So we have the segment that touched upon the fear of the end of the world as the clock struck 12 on New Year's Eve. To Hell and Back was not a Meatloaf's album, but followed a pair of friends, Nate and Troy, filming a coven of witches as they summon a demon called Ukabon to unleash fury on Earth or something. During the ritual, which was not carried out very confidently, someone sneaked in and was captured on tape, and through an attempt to capture the intruder, Nate and Troy was sent to hell where their camcorder was still working perfectly well, allowing them to reveal the landscape that drew intrigue and curiosity. The hellscape was actually quite brilliantly done as the filmmakers found a suitable location, and with some post-production lightning effects and some scary props and sound effects, the audience was put through a perilous land where we knew the safety of the two mortal men were not guaranteed. They made a demon friend along the way and help was offered with conditions, but all the while I just thought she would betray them. The climactic end was quite a ride literally and tied this film nicely with a bow. Husband and wife directing team Joseph and Vanessa Winter went on to make their full feature film debut with 2022's Deadstream, which was a live stream of someone in a haunted house, not too far from what they did in To Hell and Back. VHS 99 certainly was the best of the lot so far, with 3 fun segments, and the interludes, although did not account to much, was not awfully distracting. It was an 8 upon 10 for me, and I was looking forward to the next edition. The 6th film in the franchise premiered in 2023 and titled VHS 85, as we went back to the good old days of the 80s where VHS was at a reach. There was even a rip on Betamax. There was the return of an overarching frame narrative, and this was the first movie in which 2 segments were written and directed by the same director and the plots were intertwined. David Bruckner, who was the producer for the VHS series since the return in 2021, assumed the director role for the frame narrative called Total Copy, the first time since he did Amateur Night in the original VHS. Total Copy is a documentary about a group of research scientists tracking the proliferation of a shape-shifting being they named Rory. Rory, who was infatuated with the Jane Fonda-style workout videos, would slowly grow into a cocoon before metamorphosis into a human form, and it freaked the team out when it was in the form of that particular researcher who had not come in contact with Rory. The ending followed the classic alien monster feature, but had a really hilarious final scene. This was perhaps the best frame narrative for me for the entire series, including 2024 VHS Beyond. Writer-director Mike P. Nelson's first of 2 segments was No Wake, which see a group of young people going on a summer romp at a lake in the mode of a Friday the 13th. As the attraction between young men and women was simmering, a killer started encroaching for the perfect moment before unleashing the stray bullets. There were casualties for sure, but as people always said, there's something in the water and we got an interesting twist. Gigi Saul Guerrero was a familiar name to me, especially her involvement in Satanic Hispanics, another horror anthology film which showcased Latin American horror directors. Her segment in that film called Nahuales was an interesting exploration of Aztec folklore which blurred reality and fiction. In God of Death, Guerrero touched upon the Great Mexico City earthquake in 1985, in which a television crew was filming a morning news show before got swallowed into the debris from the earthquake. As the rescue team risked their own well-being to bring some of the survivors to safety, they uncovered some ancient ominous remnants which would prove scarier than a devastating earthquake. God of Death is the token non-American segment, although the interesting premise it still lacked a bit of bite as compared to the other segments for me. With the popularity of the movie Tron during that period, the immense obsession with the virtual reality led us to TKNOGD. In a performance art which championed technology and the denouncing of religion, the performer used some advanced technology back in 1985 to entertain her audience, thinking it would be a cool experience. As part of the performance, she was to denounce God and clamor for her own version of God. Little did she realize, artificial intelligence was already in a progressive stage back in the mid-80s, and she actually summoned something that ultimately taught her a lesson. To the general audience, this was a rather plain performance art with little storytelling, but the gore that ensued make it all worth it, especially when the VR headset been forcefully removed from the artist in the end. Director Natasha Kamani made the horror feature Lucky in 2020, and no, it was not based from that Britney Spears song of the same name. Mike P. Nielsen's second feature was Ambrosia, which opened into a family party where you had your extended family with some aunties, a grandpa, and some cousins you want to shun. It appeared like the family was celebrating a birthday party or farewell party before the main character was going off to college. Little did we know that this family is not your typical suburban natives who talked about Texas and gossips. There were some tatters from the events of No Week, which led to the ultimate showdown at the end. This really took me by surprise, and I loved every meaning of it. Director Nelson did the remake of Wrong Turn in 2021, which I have caught, and it was a pleasant surprise as well. To cap off VHS 85, we have the celebrity director Scott Derrickson, who once directed the first Doctor Strange movie after the success of Sinister. Together with his usual collaborator, C. Robert Cargill, Derrickson gave us Dream Kill, an insight into a killer's cold-blooded quest to slaughter his victims and recorded as a snuff film to be sent to the police. The police then came to the actual crime scene, but the time of murder did not match up, like the killer had choreographed the kill, taped it down, sent to the cops before committing the actual murder. As the police went around a wild goose chase and been baffled by the motives of the killer, they soon realized that there was no need to look too far to find a real culprit. While the plot could be a bit convoluted, the competent acting and filmmaking made this a gritty feature to follow closely till the end. It was said to possess some sort of connection to Derrickson's 2023 successful movie, The Black Phone, which I could barely come up with any sort of association. The reviews for VHS 85 were uniformly positive, and I have to agree with what the critics said. I enjoyed most segments, with God of Death the only one that lost me, yet the effort director Guerrero put in was still admirable. Another 8 out of 10 from me. So now we come to VHS Beyond, the latest offering which went more into the sci-fi realm, which likely could be Black Mirror with lots of extraterrestrial elements. Being a massive fan of Film Jump podcast for 15 years now, seeing director Jay Chill's involvement brought out a fangirl squeal in me. I really enjoyed his Cursed film series on Shudder, so his sensibilities in horror and documentary films making were exquisite. Making the frame narrative of Beyond called Abduction. It told a story of a Canadian Asian man's years of encountering alien creatures. Of course, the protagonist had to be played by Jerry Eng, aka Reed Farrington, a memorable character in the film Junk Law, and I thought Eng gave a very competent performance on the big screen. Remember when I highlighted the gratuitous usage of the whole SWAT team raid operation? We have another one to start Beyond. However, from director Jordan Downey, whose claim to fame was a cult horror film Thanksgiving from 2008. In a story he co-wrote with Kevin Stewart, this was a rogue police team called Warden, as the officers, especially one visibly unstable one called E.T., who were determined to find the culprits who have abducted babies in an extended period. E.T. was one of those unfortunate parents whose baby had been adopted, so the whole mission was very personal for him. Warden arrived at a decrepit house where everyone went gun crazy over zombie-like creatures they called brooders. The cameraman was also a fellow officer, but lacked the gusto and competence compared to his compatriots, leading him to be constantly scorned at. The violent rate was awfully fun and can be compared to some of the well-crafted action films out there. Eventually, the crew went up to the attic, where else beside a basement, and the title of the segment, Stock, came into realization. The effects might be a bit cheesy, but I had a lot of fun and it was a promising start to the anthology movie. The token non-American feature this time round was Dream Girl, written and directed by Indian filmmaker Virat Pal, with input by Evan Dixon. It focused on a Bollywood scene with some novice paparazzi trying to catch some scoops before their competitors did. Oh boy, they got more than what they bargained for, when a young actress who was propelled to stardom in record short time was not what she seemed to be. There was a solid Bollywood sing and dance segment which was quite a breeze to sit through, and the song itself gave evidence of the actress' origin and her unparalleled rise to fame. One of the fumbling paparazzi had to stumble into uncharted territory to unravel the mystery and unleash the bloodlust. Seems like the crazy momentum from Stock continued into Dream Girl, and I was buying into the hype so far. Do you think the ride was going to slow down? Think again. Director Justin Martinez, the departed member of the Radio Silence group, created this segment called Live and Let Dive. You know, a play on words of that James Bond film and the Wings song. Those with fear of height or acrophobia might need to shun this segment, as our protagonist Zack was cajoled to do skydiving on his birthday with his wife and closest friends. With the GoPro strapped on his helmet, what hysteria that transpired was recorded, and it could be a snuff film to be sent to the Faces of Death video series if it still exists today. Not taking the out of this world happenings into consideration, the free fall from the sky to meandering through an orange grove to elude and capture gave this segment its credence. 3 for 3, Beyond is rousing up to outdo all its predecessors. Remember that Kevin Smith's body horror Tusk, starring the kid who could see ghosts, and one Justin Long? That movie must have traumatized Justin Long so much that he roped in, I suppose, his brother Christian to write and direct the next segment called Fur Babies. A youthful animal rights activist group infiltrated a dog daycare center, which they suspected the proprietors were doing some sketchy things to the dogs under their care. In a tension-filled sequence during their non-polished infiltration that could rival the opening scene to Tarantino's Inglourious Basterds, the daycare owners caught hold of the activists and subjected them through some of the most abhorrent body manipulations you could never imagine one would be put through. Fur Babies was a novel idea in the world of VHS, and the violence on screen might not be as visceral as compared to most of what we had seen, but it still messed with your mind as much as some of the most disgusting things we had seen so far in this franchise. We come to the last segment, and it was written by horror author Mike Flanagan of Oculus and Dr. Sleep fame, and directed by his wife, Scream Queen Kate Siegel. Stowaway allowed Flanagan to work on a theme he rarely could do, as Haley, an explorer of the extraterrestrial, doing her stealth mission in the Mojave Desert, a hotspot of sightings, and amazingly, she found what she was looking for. With her potato-quality camcorder, she was documenting a spaceship assimilating as a natural landmark and was gathering animal specimens for their research. Haley's intrusion somehow made them decide they got the human subject they needed, and the spaceship then left Earth. This segment was no alien, as it was ponderous and even grinding. But the main attraction comes from the body horror, which involves some sound scientific basis. So there you have it, VHS Beyond, certainly built like the most complete anthology presentation with 4 solid features and upon reconsideration through this review, Stowaway was a decent ride as well. The frame narrative adduction might be the worst of the lot. Even that was an interesting documentary feature, and the ultimate showdown in the epilogue was scary as hell. I guess I would award it an unprecedented 9 upon 10. So could VHS 8 in 2025 outdo this? I certainly hope so. So I've covered a run of a franchise that spanned 12 years with 7 full feature films, 726 minutes of runtime, featuring 40 fabulous horror genre film directors, and many more writers, cinematographers, actors, visual effect artists, and so many more behind the scene. For its longevity and the ability to come up with novel ideas of found footage horror, I could say this is my favorite horror anthology franchise at this moment. If you appreciate my efforts to make this journey and painstakingly creating this video, please click a like and appreciate if you could share as well. Subscribe to this channel with upcoming reviews for the likes of Alien Romulus, Terrifier 3, and The Substance. My previous review was Blumhouse and director James Watkins' remake of Speak No Evil. Do excuse me as I am trying to figure out how to shoot a decent looking found footage film on my iPhone that would involve some sort of SWAT team raid where an alien and the succubus were caught doing unimaginable things to each other. Good night.